Good afternoon, good evening, friends. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome you to the second webinar for this year. As you do know, we have a monthly webinar, which is a motivational webinar. It's about you listening and being inspired for change. This webinar is discussing with us the one slide story. This webinar is very special to me, and the speaker is also very special to me. He's been a long time collaborator and friend. But the most important thing that happened was me listening to Dr. Falabi and transforming my life. Dr. Falabi started his residency in Ife, and then I think he finished in Ife, and for some reason we were off and on, and then he moved to MRC Gambia. I met sorry, I keep calling you professor because you're due to, I mean, I'm definitely your professor. I don't know why that title hasn't come to you. Well, we were at a conference, and that was listening to Dr. Falabi while he was at MRC. He presented a slide, and it was all pictures. And for the first time in my life, I experienced somebody speaking to their slide. He wasn't reading his slide. He was speaking to his slide. Thereafter, I've been in other conferences and I've listened to top researchers in the world. All you see are pictures, but they speak intelligently and brilliantly. Professor Afolabi's presentation still remains like yesterday in my brain. And I had to learn to evolve. Apologies, I'm in a party. I had to learn to evolve my use of slides into something that is a single slide that tells a story, where everything I need to say is beautifully packaged. You're looking at it, but then I also learn to speak to my slide rather than reading my slide. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome Professor Falabi. Apologies, I know officially you're not Falabi, Prof, but knowing the years of work, I'm sure you're nothing less but a prof. It's indeed my pleasure to welcome Professor Falabi, a colleague, a long-time partner in research, and a friend who would introduce himself and tell us the power of a one-slide story. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you so much, my dear, very senior sister, senior colleague, my teacher, and teacher of my teachers, Professor Morenike Oluwatoyin Upong. I really want to start by thanking you for inviting me to this very important program, and I feel highly honored and privileged to be here. Like Professor Morenike mentioned, I undertook my postgraduate residency training at Obafemi Awolowo University, where she was doing a very, very senior colleague, and our path did not cross clearly then. I first met her despite reading several of her very thought-provoking work on community advocacy on HIV. We met face to face in India, outside the continent of Africa, during microbicide conference in 2008. It was then I met with her, and I expressed delight in meeting her and reading several of his very, very insightful work. So since then, we have worked together. She invited me, to many of her very highly impactful projects. And we have worked together and co-authored several papers together, some of which I'm going to highlight during this talk. So, my dear brothers and sisters in this profession of either public health or in sciences. You are most welcome to this talk. My name is Mohammed Afolabi, and I'm very happy to share with you or talk to you about this topic that has been captioned in a very nice way, very captivating way, Dare to Simplify, the art of the one-slide story. Honestly, when Professor Morenike reached out to me and was talking about the presentation I made, I was wondering which presentation. I can't even remember. But I know Professor Morenike is such a wonderful mentor. I learned a lot from her. And I want to honor that invitation by sharing the little I know. I hope it will meet up to the expectation of Professor Morenike and all of my colleagues who are on this platform. So, for just a brief introduction, I'm a medical doctor, a family physician. I completed my residency training at a prestigious Obafemi Awolowo University Teaching Hospital Complex. Having obtained a medical degree from University of Ibadan in 1999, I started my residency training in 2002 after completing the housemanship at Federal Medical Center Owo and also the the mandatory national service in Kaduna State. During my residency training, I enrolled in master degree program in public health at the university, and I was then a senior registrar, and I was also undergoing my master degree, which I completed in 2007. I completed my residency training and obtained the fellowship of West African College of Physicians in 2006. A year after, I completed the fellowship of the National Postgraduate Medical College of Nigeria.
Dr. Falabi, don't forget you can share your slides. You're not sharing your slides.
Yes. Oh, can you see my slide?
I can see it, Emma. It's showing.
Oh,
on the profile page. Yeah.
Can you
yes,
see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. So what I was just saying, I'm just trying to give a background, my journey from how I started, from my humble beginning to where I'm presently is. And I'm still looking towards and up to Professor Morenike because she's still my mentor. So I mentioned that I started from my medical degree from University of Ibadan. Then my residency training, I started at the University of Obafemi Awolowo University Teaching Hospital in Ile-Ife. Then during that time, I had the opportunity of undergoing a master's degree in public health at Obafemi Awolowo University, which I completed almost the same time with the completion of my fellowship. I work as a consultant family physician at Ladoke Akintola University Teaching Hospital in Oshogbo from 2007 to 2009. In 2009, mid-June, I took up a full research appointment at a Medical Research Council unit in the Gambia. I'm going to be giving a fuller story. This is just a kind of a brief one. In the Gambia, I work as a lead physician on several clinical vaccine trials, including HIV vaccine trials, malaria vaccine trials, to mention a few. So it was during that time that I got an EDCTP-funded scholarship to undertake a PhD program at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in London from 2011 to 2015. A day after my PhD defense, which I passed without obtaining any correction from the examiner, is a very rare feat. And I was told that I broke the record of over 20 years in the department. It was like having a first class in the undergraduate program. I was offered a job a day after to lead an Ebola vaccine trial in Sierra Leone because that time coincided with the largest outbreak of Ebola in West African countries of Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. I did not take up that appointment until a year later. So I joined London School as an assistant professor in 2016. And during that time, my stay in Sierra Leone, although a staff of London School, I developed a grant for UKRI Research and Innovation, and I got a grant of £1.2 million, and that facilitated my movement from Sierra Leone to the UK in January 2020. Barely 3 months after I fully relocated to the UK, COVID spread to the UK, and I tried to use my experience in Ebola control for COVID control in the UK. I'm still going to talk to you more about that, but I was able to obtain the fellowship of Faculty of Public Health of Royal College of Physicians of the UK, as well as fellowship of Higher Education Academy in the UK. I'm currently the fellow of a UK Research and Innovation Future Leaders, and I have over 20 years experience in evaluating and implementing strategic intervention for control of infectious diseases, including malaria, HIV, Ebola, COVID, and neglected tropical diseases. I serve on several high-profile committees, including WHO SAGE Working Group, Norfolk Council on Bioethics, EDC TP3 Scientific Advisory Committee. I'm also presently a co-director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine Vaccine Center. So now going to the reason why we are here. It's a familiar challenge that all of us do face, especially when we find out that the work of over a year or two, or even sometimes 5 years, you are asked to come and talk about it in less than 10 minutes. You now find out that how do I structure this work in a way that it will be presentable, that my audience will not be sleeping along the line while I'm doing the presentation, that it will sort of engage the interest of stakeholders, especially the major stakeholders, including the people who are going to assess me, my supervisor, my assessor, my examiner, my reviewers, as well as the important one, the policy maker. So I want to say that this problem is not peculiar to you. We have all experienced it. For example, if you submit your proposal to a grant reviewer, by the time to get to page 3, they've already lost interest. How do you keep them engaged and interested and give you a favorable review that will ensure that you get that grant? I mentioned that I got a grant of £1.2 million. Subsequently, I've also attracted more and more £1 million grants. How are you able, or how am I able to do it? And how can you also tell your story that you ensure that you are able to engage those people that will decide your fate? The way that when Super Story is being viewed in all our homes, we keep glued to the TV such that we are always suspecting of what happened next and that we look forward to the subsequent episode. Also, when we are in conferences, we find out that if we start from the traditional way of the introduction, problem statement, objective, methodology, results, and recommendation, you find out that half of the conference audience, they are already either sleeping or confused because they are not convinced because of our traditional jargons and speak that we always, technical jargons that we always introduce. And sometimes when we do meet policymakers, especially in the ministries, they will say, everything that you have said. And so what? What is the implication of the findings? And sometimes we become dazed and become sort of taken aback in a way that we are not prepared for, because we don't know how we can talk to these people, engage them, and enlist their interest in our work. Then we not just see that we are in a kind of a situation or in a community, the academic community, that only reward paper publication in such a way that it is a common saying that you either publish or you perish. But we can actually turn that to our advantage, that we publish and we also flourish, not publish and perish. Because we need to take our story to the people that matters, the public, the policy maker, our colleagues during conferences, the grant reviewers, our supervisor. They need to hear our story. And we should not make it complex. We make it very, very clear, such that our grandmothers in the village will be able to listen to us and understand what we are saying. And that's what we are going to be talking to us today, about the opportunity of using one single slide to be able to convey a message that is very clear, convincing, compelling, and that can attract influence and can attract funding. It's not a summary, but it's a kind of a tool that we can strategically deploy to win hearts to our side. How do we do that? If you see this slide, I hope you can see all this slide. You see that what we always do in the traditional way is to follow this kind of a sequential, technical way of starting with problem statement or background, objective, method, then the result of finding, the recommendation. Instead of that kind of a complex and technical ways or steps, we look at the end goal. You look, if you see the complexity at the beginning, rather you forget everything and you find one thing that is very interesting, and that is the goal. And you now use a kind of a simplifier method or approach. You are not hiding that complexity, rather you are building a kind of a bridge that will ensure that your story will be very clear to everybody. Even the blind will be able to see. And the people that are not very good in hearing will be able to perceive the message that you are conveying. Your goal is not to bring all those complex data that you have collected and accumulated over a long period of time, but you want to create a kind of understanding that will stimulate and ginger people and will spark action for them to now ask many interesting questions that's about this. And you now be giving them one by one, as if you have all your cards in your pocket. As they are asking you, you are just giving them this the card, this the question, and this one, this the question you are asking, because you have already whet their appetite, you have already stimulated their interest, and they will ask for more, and you now be in a vantage position to give them and answer their question satisfactorily. In essence, as a researcher, we are not just a researcher or a data scientist. We should also have the skill of storytelling, the way Wale Adenuga will tell super story that every nook and cranny of Nigeria always long to watch the super story, the way they are going to tell the story in a way that touches the heart. And in that manner and approach, the core question that we are going to ask is that what is the one thing that will really, really touch or catch the attention of my audience? And it is there that you are going to start that. And how do we achieve that? This is the next slide. So, like having a kind of a white canvas How are we going to couch our narrative in such a way that will stimulate our audience? So we need to have a kind of a hook, like you want to catch a big fish inside a river. You need to have a hook that you put something there that immediately you put that hook inside the river, the fish can just pick it and they will have that interest. Because you have gained that interest, from there, you'll be able to follow systematically and pass your message in a very intelligent way. So how do you get a hook? You get the headline. You like when you read most newspaper, they have what is called clickbait. That clickbait is for you to be able to click and read, because by the time you now read, they have sold their story to you. One way or the other, they have gained a kind of views, and they have made money. But the story that they read may not match the title. So, but I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just using that as a kind of example. For example, if you want to talk about a huge community-based trials that resulted in a reduction in maternal mortality, if you put that title, it may not catch the attention of the audience. But if you use something like a community mobile phone alert system can reduce maternal delay by 4 out of 10, that one will get in the interest of policymaker because of the burden of maternal deaths. Then that should be followed by what is called the core, visual core, that will sort of be a kind of a magnet that will keep the interest to be active, to be alive. So that evidence you now provide it. It has to be a kind of a very simple, illustrative chart that is not complicated. You remove all the clutter. I'm going to show you some of the examples shortly. And that will be your proof or your evidence that you are a scientist. Remember, instead of starting from our traditional method, you start with something like a hook that pick the big fish, and you need to maintain that interest, sustain it so that the fish will not get out of the hook. And that's the visual core. Attractive, simple, illustrative map that engages the audience and keep them interested. Then the third one, how do you achieve that result? And that's the part that is asking the question of the so what. You now need to quickly highlight the context of the problem that could have been your starting point, your key findings, and the implication or the so what. That is, after getting these results, what is the next step? What is the implication? How do you apply this finding to real life? How does it inform practice or policy? Most of the time, if you follow this step, you are able to achieve the one slide story that is engaging, insightful, and impactful. Then the last but not the least is that you should not forget to add your brand. So I'm going to show you some of the things I created to be my brand, and I want you to also look at how you can develop that. Then everything I've just said can be summarized in this one slide. You see the hook that is telling you why, the key finding, the what, the meaning, so what, and the visual anchor, how. Then I want to show you some slide that I did before and after, so as to be able to understand how you can move from the traditional way to be a powerful storyteller, delivering your research in an impactful way that engages major stakeholders, the people that matter, the people that decide, make decisions about what happened to your research. Look at this slide. There's some story behind it. I mentioned that I moved to the UK from Sierra Leone in January 2020, and by March 2020, COVID that started in China in Wuhan in December 2019 spread to the UK, and the whole system was shut down. Everywhere was under lockdown. And I was now thinking in my own small room that how can I use my experience that I've gathered in Sierra Leone for the COVID response in the UK. And with Professor Morenike, who was one of the senior author on that paper, we put together our experience on Ebola and we published the paper. Earlier before that time, I applied to be a member of COVID-19 WHO SAGE working group. And I received a letter that they are not going to take me. They rejected my application. I said, fine, no problem. And after we published that paper, I put the paper on LinkedIn. I just highlighted it that these are some of the things that we have learned in Ebola, and we can use that to do what? To help shape COVID response all over the world. Then there was no COVID vaccine. So, and exactly 3 days after, I received another letter from WHO that they are now inviting me to join the World Health Organization SAGE working group on COVID-19 vaccine, the one that they rejected. They now formally invited me to be a member. And I'm supposed to be the second African person. There were two of us, one from Mozambique and myself from Nigeria. And when I got there, I had what is called imposter syndrome. Most of the people there, I was practically the youngest. And most of the people were very, very senior colleague, global leader in vaccine. And most of the time, they challenge those of us from Africa that where are the data about COVID vaccine? Because then the COVID vaccine, we are just coming in and we were using raw data to inform policy on emergency use of a COVID-19 vaccine. And when COVID-19 vaccine started being rolled out in Africa, they wanted safety data in different parts of Africa to see how they can now use that to inform policy. But lo and behold, my brother and sister, there was no data from Africa. And each time they will say, Mohamed Afolabi, the other guy from Mozambique, can you please advise us? The reason why we invited you is to have this. And we have from several continents, from Europe, from Asia, from Australia, from Middle East. They are providing data, but there was none from Africa. So I called my colleagues across West, East, Central, and Southern Africa. I could not get anything. And COVID-19 vaccine was being given to people, but they are not collecting data on adverse events following immunization. That was why we started the first paper on this that led to this paper, covering the 15 countries in West Africa. It was published in BMJ Global Health, and BBC Africa invited me to come and talk about that paper, and also BBC focused on Africa, and the other one in London. So I was there telling them the implication of the low uptake of COVID vaccine in West Africa. And that now battered this particular one. We scale it to the 52 countries in Africa, how they implemented the vaccine. It was a very complicated study with a lot of mathematical modeling. And I submitted it for presentation at the American Society and Tropical Medicine meeting in New Orleans in 2025. It was accepted for a lightning talk. And they said I should talk about it in only 3 minutes, something that we spent more than 3 years to do. So when I first of all did this first draft, I said I cannot present all this in 3 minutes. So what I did, instead of a COVID-19 vaccine in 52 countries, I now put it as a kind of a goal. What is the goal? And now the best thing is to look at the lesson that the COVID implementation can give for the future pandemic preparedness. And instead of the first slide, this previous one, this is what I presented under 3 minutes. And I did not forget to put my brand, that if you click on this, they can get all the information about the study, about the method, and also about me, who was one of the first joint author of that paper. Then this one, this is what my PhD is all about. I developed something called multimedia consent, and it was based on an encounter, which I'm going to talk about shortly, with a research participant. And it was on that basis that I developed a multimedia consent tool that integrated video, audio, and kind of animated narration in Gambian local languages. Their languages are not written, they are not formally taught in school. And to obtain informed consent, we have to translate and back translate. But in Gambia, it is not possible. So I developed this multimedia tool, and I tested it in a randomized control trial. And on the basis of that, I found out that participants who receive their consent through the multimedia tool have better retention, better comprehension of the study. And the National Ethics Committee in the Gambia accepted it as an alternative consent procedure. And I did my PhD on it, and I passed the PhD without correction. So subsequently, they said we should develop that consent into an e-consent app. And so many developers were interested, and I was asked to come and present it to them. That particular consent also earned me a prize by the MRC Chief Executive Officer. That's the picture that you are seeing. It was this particular single slide that I was able to tell the story. And those developers were very, very impressed about using a locally grown initiative to solve a big problem. They even said the problem is not about Africa or Gambia alone, that even in the UK, the problem of poor comprehension of informed consent is amongst them. This is another one example. Another example is for my UKRI that earned me 1.2 million pounds. This was the vision. And the next one, you can see how cluttered it is. The next one, we have published like 9 publications in a high impact journal since 2020. And we have additional 2 currently in preparation. This is the second slide. Putting these 2 together, this first one and this second one, you can see I've summarized everything only in 1 page, looking at all the study that I've been doing in the past 5 to 6 years, only in 1 page, telling us the phases, the second phase, the third phase, the specific aim, the specific aim 2, and the third specific aim. And you can now see where it's starting and where it's going to lead, and the final goal, that is the optimized equity sensitive R21 malaria implementation. That is from environmental stratification to a kind of a way you can predict and have an integrated framework. So a brief personal history. So I mentioned that I moved from Nigeria to Gambia in 2009, and I was leading I was the study physician coordinating the clinical, the field, and the lab component of some high-profile vaccine trial. One was HIV. When I finished that, I started the malaria vaccine, the one that is currently known as R21. So one fateful morning, the mother of a child came to that clinic and said, "Look, Dr. Mohammed, I want my child to join this study. However, I don't want to go through the consent process." I said, "Why?" The lady said she understood everything about the study, so they didn't need the consent. I said, "What do you understand by the study?" He said, "Is your study not a single blind study?" I said, "Really? How did you know it's a single blind study?" And she told me that in a single blind study, there's a possibility of losing one eye. And in a double blind study, there's a possibility of losing the two eyes. I was totally perplexed that this lady was educated to high education, you understand, secondary school, that if this level of misunderstanding about research concepts can be demonstrated by somebody who is educated in the community, how much more people who did not go to school at all? And that was what inspired me to address that particular problem of a miscomprehension of a research concept like single blind, double blind, by developing an innovative multimedia concept tool that integrated audio, animation, and video in Gambian local languages. And that tool has actually has changed the way informed consent is being undertaken in the Gambia and similar setting, and also outside Africa. So now I want to challenge all of you from this little talk that you can actually simplify things. And what you do, you will now amplify your impact. You start from being an ordinary person and you'll be doing extraordinary things. And your challenge is that out of several nice ideas, fantastic one that you have, just take one and write one thing that you want people to remember. For example, the title of my talk, when I always want to talk, is that one eye for the single blind and two eye for double blind. People will be wondering that, what is this story all about? But if I say evaluation of informed consent procedure in the Gambia, people will be thinking this is the same traditional format. But rather, taking a kind of flip side, that is, one eye for single blind, two eyes for double blind. It's a very interesting way for people to remember you. And most time, people always want to talk to me, but how about your one eye for single blind and two eyes for double blind? Then you can now build one slide using the framework that we have mentioned, the hook. Then after the hook, you move to the next one, the evidence, then the anchor, you understand, your brand. So talking about what, your how, your why, your how you did it, your what and so what. All these are very important. And you can now share it with your colleagues. What I do most time is by sharing it with my daughters. And if they can understand it, I know that I've been able to convey the message in a very clear way and can engage people. Then, by the time you are able to do that once or twice, you have actually acquired the skill, an important skill set of insight. You can craft your story in a way that it will be very impossible for anybody to ignore. And I want to finish by sharing with you this theory of a 2% of population. I don't know how much time I still have left. Wow. So try as much as possible to be the 2% in the population. Go for your dreams. Embrace the unknown. Have confidence. Like change. Don't stay in your comfort zone. Don't be like the 98% of population. Be like every other person. I was a GMP resident, but I said I will be a GMP resident with a difference. I thank God I was able to achieve that. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope and pray that you continue to achieve continuous progress in your career. Thank you very much. And thanks for your attention. And thank you again, Professor Morenike, for inviting me to talk on this important platform. God bless you all.
God bless you, Dr. Falabi. Can you all see what I was talking about? when I said the day I listened to him, it was mind-blowing. It was I'm sure he said he can't remember. I'm sure, of course, you won't remember. I was the one that was seated in the audience, dazed, and I was looking, Dr. Philip, this guy has changed, though. And I knew my own life had to change. Thank you for sharing that brilliant, powerful story. I can also tell you that I learned the hook without knowing it was the hook. When I presented for my PhD, it was the hook, and that was the end. I got the cum laude, but I knew it was the hook. Everybody was seated to listen to the key message. Thank you so much for making this simple, and I hope everybody here, as you've listened, you are inspired to know that it is possible. Professor Afolabi is here with one head, one mind, one quote. It looks like you, but he made it possible. Thanks for being here, and looking forward to you being part of the March session. God bless you. Have a wonderful Ramadan, have a wonderful Easter, and have a wonderful week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, ma. God bless you.